Hello everyone, I'll continue the series on Wesley So with an amazing game he played against Boris Gelfand in 2014, so we are jumping forward a couple of years. And at this time Boris Gelfand was one of the strongest players in the world, and he was at his top rating, I think, and at his peak strength. He was almost 2800 at the time, and Wesley was just over 2700, so still getting into the top of the world. Of the chess world. And the game was played in the prestigious Tata Steel tournament, played in Wijk, Netherlands, which is one of the biggest and most famous chess tournaments in the world in the calendar year, and even today it's played only by the top grandmasters. Wesley finished in 6th place. He had 6 points out of 11 games, and Levon Aronian won in clear first with 8 points, so not such a strong performance for Wesley, but this game is, I think, worthy of showing, and I think it was an amazing positional game. Now the game opened with pawn to e4 by Wesley, c5 by Boris Gelfand, knight to f3, knight to c6, we have the Old Sicilian. Now of course if Wesley plays d4, it would transpose into the Open Sicilian, but we have knight to c3 continuing the Old Sicilian, and it was a very traditional line, the line that was played, and a very common line which was played over 400 times, I think, in Grandmaster games, and the highest rated game was actually Hikaru Nakamura versus Boris Gelfand, played a couple of months after this game. So the line was popular at the time in 2013-14. Now e5 was played. This is the main move, bishop to c4, and you can see immediately that black is conceding the d5 square, but he will get a lot for that. So now, after the move bishop to c4, bishop e7, black is developing d3, developing the dark squared bishop, knight to f6, knight to d2, and now this plan of knight to d2 back to f1 or to f1 is a theoretical plan, and if you've never seen it before it might seem strange, but the knight is actually misplaced on f3, and since white played knight to f3 early on in the game, now it's time to remaneuver the knight back to f1, and you will see why. So now knight to d2, d6, knight to f1. After knight to f1, the main move is bishop to g4, and here the main move for white is the move f3, and after f3 white is ready to get into the e3 square and challenge the d5 square once more, and you can see that all of white's pieces are trying to control the d5 square, which is the weakest square in black's position. So positionally this is better for white, but he yet has to gain an advantage because of the weak square, and of course white has a weak d4 square, so black has some compensation. So f3 is the main move, chasing the bishop away to e6. Now taking on e6 has only been played once, and it's a bad move. Bishop e6, fe6 is much better for black, because now knight to g3 would be the only move, and black gets to play d5. And if black gets to play d5, then d5 is no longer a weakness, and black has resolved the main positional problem in the position. He can castle both kingside and queenside. Kingside is of course much safer after this, but the point is that black has no problems in the position, and he stands better. So after f3, bishop e6, it's not good to take for white, but knight to e3 is a good move, which keeps the tension around the d5 square, and if black ever takes, the best is to actually take with the pawn, not with the knight, to increase the pressure on d5. But after bishop to g4, Wesley So didn't go for the most common move f3, by far the most common move. He played a fairly uncommon queen to d2, which has only been played 8 or 9 times, so perhaps as a surprise for Gelfand, who is, by the way, one of the biggest experts in the Sicilian, and he has played this numerous times. After queen to d2, he plays knight to d7, which is the most common move out of 8 games, and the best move. Now knight to d5. Now once that the d5 square isn't challenged at all, he puts the knight into d5, castles, c3 reinforcing the center, and of course preventing the black knight from jumping into d4. Bishop to e6, challenging the knight, queen to c2, knight to b6, and now of course Wesley doesn't want to give up the light squared bishop, he takes on b6, ab6, and now a4. And of course, black has now made a weakness on the b6 square, and the pawns are doubled, and a4 is an imprecise move. Knight to e3 would have been better. But a4 is, from a human's perspective, very good and very interesting. And now you might wonder what would happen if black ever captures the bishop on c4, but now after d takes c, white is simply increasing the pressure on the two key squares in the position, and the position would be almost winning for white, so black should never take the bishop. Instead, we have king to h8 by Boris Gelfand, unpinning the king on this diagonal to make sure the bishop can move and that black can eventually play f5, f4. We have bishop to d2, developing the bishop, queen to d7, and now rook to d1. This is another imprecise move, but it's okay. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. Once again, best was to play knight to e3, but rook to d1 is okay. It's not such a big mistake. Now, what knight to e3 would have done, it would have prevented d5. But d5 is a very double-edged move, and in many Sicilians, what weaker players do, and some stronger players, as soon as they can play d5, they play it because they know that once black achieves d5, he's automatically better. But that's true in general and in theory. In practice, you can sometimes go wrong, especially if you're human and you are mostly playing human players. So Boris Gelfand plays d5 here, and we have e takes d5, bishop takes d5, knight to e3 now, bishop to e6, and now queen to b3. And here, if Wesley hadn't played queen to b3, there were better moves, then the position would be a slow grind for white and an eventual positional advantage, which would be too much for black to handle because of the pawn weaknesses. But Wesley So found an imprecise move, a bad move, but a move which doesn't allow Gelfand any room to maneuver, and he actually makes a mistake early on after this move. Wesley plays queen to b3, which is of course giving away the d3 pawn. And Gelfand takes, queen takes d3. Now, of course, if bishop takes d3, then bishop takes b3, and black is simply a pawn up with a better position. So, Wesley So plays bishop takes e6, we have f takes e6, queen takes b6, getting back the pawn. It wasn't a pawn sacrifice, it was just a pawn trade. But Wesley is reasoning that the a pawn is the more important factor in the position than the d3 pawn. And here Boris Gelfand plays an astonishing mistake which I simply can't figure out. Now, he played queen to e4, and this move immediately makes the position much better for white. Now, what he was reasoning perhaps is that after queen takes here on b7, then perhaps rook f to b8 would be winning because the queen is trapped, but Wesley So wasn't going to take on b7 anyway, because after rook to c8 or the knight moving, the queen is almost trapped anyway. So queen to e4 is just a mistake because the queen was preventing the king from castling. So after queen to e4, we have b3 by Wesley, solidifying his position. Rook a to b8, defending the pawn, another mistake because the pawn really can't be taken. Now Wesley simply castles, and this position is now almost winning, and you're going to see an extraordinary example of how a position with even material and with seemingly equally active pieces can be 100 times better for one side, and how Boris Gelfand went wrong with moves that seemingly are good. First of all, rook a to b8 was a clear mistake because after this the pawn doesn't really have to be defended. After b3, what he could have tried was c4, and c4 would be a very aggressive try, a pawn sacrifice which would give black fighting chances. But after rook a to b8 and castles, white is simply better, and we have queen to g6 now, another inaccurate move, a5 by Wesley, advancing his pawn, rook f to c8, trying to solidify his position, knight to c4, getting another piece into the attack, and now we can already see that there's a lot of problems in black's position, and that something is going to fall. It's either going to be the c5 pawn, the e5 pawn, or the b7 pawn, and the e6 pawn isn't that safe either. Now we have queen to c2, trying to attack, but it doesn't really attack anything. Rook to c1, chasing the queen away, queen d3, bishop e3, now double attacking c5, which really can't be defended anymore. H6, making loop for the king, rook f to d1, chasing the queen further away, queen to f5, another inaccuracy, now rook to d7, attacking the bishop, rook to f8, trying to attack the f2 pawn, but now after rook to f1, Boris Gelfand actually resigned. And if you try to think about this position, and try to assess it, evaluate the position, then you can see that black has 3 weaknesses which can't be defended. And usually it's said that if you manage to create 2 weaknesses in your opponent's position, it's going to be enough to win. And Wesley So created 3, so the position is clearly winning. But it's very instructive to watch how this position became that much better for Wesley. And of course, the move after queen to b6, the move queen to e4 is the clear mistake. After queen takes b6, black is equal or even slightly better. And after rook f to b8, the position would be solid for black, and he would have an advantage. Perhaps even moves such as rook to a6, chasing the queen further out, moves such as b5, once the queen isn't attacking the knight, and even c4 to extend the scope of the bishop. And I think black would have a great chance to create something out of this position. But queen to e4 is just an unusual mistake, and it's fun to watch how Wesley So exploited that with a series of fairly simple passive moves. b3, rook a b8, castles, nothing major, queen to g6, a5, and now after this, knight to c4 is just winning. And after knight to c4, it becomes visible that queen to e4 was a clear waste of tempo, and it allowed white to reroute his pieces to perfect squares. Okay, everybody, I hope you liked this positional Old Sicilian by Wesley So and Boris Gelfand, and stay tuned for more chess. Thanks for watching. Bye.